Fort. You've had to do over some trees this week. And if you're here for item 5.4, that item has been withdrawn tonight, so that won't be considered. 5.4, that's for 195209 St George's Road, Northcote. That's not being considered tonight. That's actually been deferred to another night for consideration due to an administrative error. So if you're here for that, that won't be considered, guys. Apologies for that. Most people that we had on a list were notified. If you're here for that, it's not being considered. So, thanks.
Who's this?
We're not sure yet.
Yeah, we need to confirm the date. Let's look at the report, but it will be within the next planning meeting. But we'll let the website know. Sorry, I'll be part of hearing 195209.
That's correct. That's not being considered tonight. That's it. Yeah.
So just there was no objectives to that. So there's no objective. It wasn't advertised. So there's no objectives. So
But everyone knew about it.
yeah. Everyone
Knew about it. Oh, it'll get around. We'll get around.
We'll get around. Yeah.
It's Northcote, it's said stories, what do you expect?
You can still put an objection in.
We'll try it.
Wouldn't there be a law?
Can you hear me now? Is that better? Sit closer. Sit next row. Next row. I sound too good, darling. Have some water. That's interesting. How are we going to notify?
Is this yours? Yeah, because someone put this here. Oh, is this yours?
No. I'll show you it's yours.
It's a weird one. 2 minutes. Sorry? Which one? That's it. It's the only one. Yeah, a second there, we vote for it, and you just speak. That's better. Before we commence, members of the gallery, I'll just run through some housekeeping rules. If you've got your phones, can you please switch them off or put them on silent? That's very, very important. You can leave at the conclusion of the item you've come here to listen to, or you can stay for the duration of the night. We'll be most of the night, I should say. Officers will present the report to council, where we'll be asking questions. Okay, there's no direct dialogue between the gallery and councillors, only those who are requested to speak, and the officer will announce the speakers for each item.
Is that yours?
Okay, it's a right at 7 o'clock, so we'll commence tonight's meeting. Can I welcome everyone here tonight to consider these planning applications before us? I would also note that if you could afford the right of those speaking so they can be heard. Thank you for that. And we'll be making decisions on these items tonight, and I'll explain the course of those decisions and avenues of appeal should the applicant or objectors choose to do so. We'll now commence tonight's meeting. The membership is as listed. Item 2, we have apologies tonight from Councillor Tim Lawrence and Councillor Stephen Seeders, who won't be joining us. Item 3, disclosure of conflicts of interest. Are there any conflicts of interest from councillors? If there's not, we'll keep moving. Item 4, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. Move Councillor McCarthy, second Councillor Greco. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Villela.
Excuse me, Mr Mayor, I'd just like to seek a suspension of standing orders.
Thanks. We have a second for that. Second, Councillor McCarthy. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of the gallery, we'll suspend the agenda for a moment so Councillor Villela can make a comment.
Yes, Mr Mayor, I ask that we allow for a minute's silence for the victims of the horrendous killing that took place in Orlando, Florida. As you know, Mr Mayor, it was an attack on the LGBT community directly, an attack on their freedoms to be who they are and express who they are. And I think Darebin Council has a very proud history and commitment to advocating the rights, human rights of our LGBT community. And today, in honour and in solidarity with that community and with the victims and their families, we have the Idaho flag flying at half-mast. And I ask that in solidarity with our LGBT community that is mourning around the world, and also in particular in Florida, that we have a minute's silence. We are talking 50 lives that were taken away senselessly, and to reaffirm our commitment to the right for people to be who they are. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Thank you. We'll commence that now. Thank you, councillors, and thank you, members of the gallery. We need a resumption of standing orders now, please. Councillor Greco's moved. Councillor McCarthy is second. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Okay, resumption of standing orders has been approved. We'll now go to item 5 on tonight's agenda, consideration of reports, commencing with the first one, 5.1, application for planning permit for 160 to 162 Victoria Road, Northcote. Over to the officers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 162 Victoria Road, Northcote seeks approval for the construction of a double-storey childcare centre, accommodating 93 children and employment of upwards of 8 childcare workers. The proposed operating hours are between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Monday to Friday, and it is also proposed to provide 2 internally illuminated business identification signs, comprising an area of 1.5 square metres each. This application also seeks approval for the waiver of 4 parking spaces. Clause 52.06 provides a base car parking requirement of 0.22 car parking spaces per child. Therefore, there is a shortfall of 4 parking spaces. Page 18 of the officer's report identifies a number of reasons for officer support of the car parking shortfall. The application has been advertised and received a total of 5 objections. And the assessment of this application is thorough within the report and is recommended to support subject to conditions.
Thank you for that. Any questions from councillors? Councillor McCarthy.
Just a question as to whether any applicant or objector...
Oh, I beg your pardon. I do apologise. Speakers. Do we have any speakers tonight?
We have an objector, Kimon Thermos of 158 Victoria Road, Northcote.
Thank you very much. Kimon, if you're here, please, if you can join us to the front here, the chair on the front desk. You've got 5 minutes to make your presentation. And the timepiece here will give you an indication how you're travelling.
Thank you for the opportunity to put my case forward. Sorry, is that better?
You have to speak into it.
Okay. Firstly, thanks for the opportunity to put my case forward. I must preface this by saying we're not against development. However, the two-storey childcare centre of the 93 children on Victoria Road is a little bit concerning to us. It creates, I suppose, for us living there for 32 years, it increases the potential for traffic congestion in the area, which we have seen over the years go up quite significantly. There is a potential for an additional 93 vehicles to be added into this traffic stream, as 72% of the children will be under 3 years old. I would expect mothers or dads or whoever partners will be dropping off children as opposed by vehicles as opposed to public transport or bikes, as indicated. During peak times, this area gets quite congested, where it can take anything 10 to 15 minutes to get out of our own driveway. The childcare centre only allows for one crossover for ingress and egress on the southern boundary of the property facing Victoria Road, which is our boundary area, and it's about 1.2 or 2 metres off that. One crossover we believe is going to add more congestion to Victoria Road as parents try to navigate left and right hand turns from proposed basement car parks, and furthermore increase the propensity of vehicular accidents during these times. Vehicles travelling north along Victoria Road want to access the Bateman car park will try to turn right despite solid lines in the traffic lanes. Other vehicles travelling south and turning left into the basement car park, and those vehicles exiting the car park that will want to turn right or left, especially during the peak traffic times, will coincide with drop-off and pick-up times. The figures depicted in the engineering report, assessment report, show 10 reported accidents during a 5-year period, 2009 to 13. There were many more unreported accidents during that time. It went on to talk about car parking. I checked some car parking figures, and a number of car parking spots outside of 149 through to 155 Victoria Road are taken as actual parking spots, where in fact there are no standing spots. So we believe parking also will be a challenge or an issue during those peak or during the times 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There'll be a number of parents who will avoid basement parking, who will not feel comfortable going in and out of that, because they're time poor as well. They'll park on Victoria Road and surrounds, obviously taking up residents parking up the front. People parking up the residence street. There's many a time where people do park across people's driveways. We've experienced that during the warm months, people attending the Northcote Aquatic Pool. We also have concerns around the excavation of the site, because there's a basement car park in there. I think there's a request for 4 less car parks. We've got concerns from our perspective. We wanted the ingress to come in through Separation Street and egress through Victoria Road, turning left over, which would sort of reduce any potential risk of any accidents and congestions. We've got concerns because in the plans, we've got an in-ground swimming pool in the backyard, which is 700 millimetres off the southern boundary of the property, and we know that the excavation works are going to come across a lot of rock and a lot of it'll be very difficult to get out of there, so we're concerned about the damage that this is going to cause to our property. We've got sewers running just on the northern side of our site, on their side of the property. It's a shared sewer. Again, we're concerned about damage there. Amenities, there's large windows facing our property, which we hope will have some sort of opaque glass on them where they can't look into our backyard, so we can enjoy the amenity of our outside living areas. As I said earlier, we want to be able to enjoy our property, and I believe that the development there in its current form will not allow us to do that. Shadowing is also, even though I've seen the plans on shadowing, I'm struggling to see how the shadowing won't be worse than what's indicated given the winter sun. But as I said, my main concern is the potential issues with traffic congestion, accidents, parking, and it really does need to have two crossovers in that development, one for ingress, one for egress. But like I said earlier, my main concern is the potential damage this sort of development to our property. And I hope council will consider that when they're finalising what the outcome is.
Thank you for that. If you can resume your seat in the gallery, that'll be great. We now have questions from councillors. Any questions? Councillor McCarthy?
Look, I just would pick up on a point that was raised by the objector just now, just in relation to how we understand the entry and exit from the site. There's a traffic management issue here. I know in the report there is reference to that, but if we can get a bit more information about how officers expect to mitigate the risks that have been raised.
Kristen?
Oh, it's to the officers?
Yep.
There is a condition that's been included, but if we can get an expansion on that point, please.
It's at 1B. Is that with regard to the single ingress egress?
That's right. Yep.
From a traffic point of view, and this has been referred to Council's traffic engineers, a single ingress egress is considered to be.
Could you please speak up? Could you please speak?
A single ingress egress is considered to be a safer option with regard to a road like Victoria Road, because if you have two crossovers, then you've got two potential conflicts for entering and exiting vehicles. And that was referred to Council's traffic engineers, and they are satisfied with a single ingress egress at the front of the site.
Councillor McCarthy.
Just a related point which wasn't raised by the objector but has been raised with me by others is just the proximity to the intersection with Separation Street, southbound vehicles entering the site and the potential for banking up and building up into the site at peak periods, what the plan is in relation to the risks associated with that. I would note that Separation Street is a single lane road in either direction, and so vehicles travelling south down Victoria Road entering the site, how we mitigate the issues that might affect traffic flow on Victoria Road as well. Which might be a Vic Roads thing, not just a council traffic management thing.
Yeah, no, it is a council traffic management, and we're just reviewing the
Sure,
traffic report.
Sorry.
Whilst the officers are finding the information, I know some latecomers this evening. Members of the Go, if you've come for item 5.4, that item has been deferred. So if you're here for that, it won't be considered tonight if you've come here late. The St George's Road one.
If it helps for officers, there is a similar situation for that occurs with the Northcote Aquatic Centre with the banking up of vehicles, and of course we've got the holding bay there. The difference here is that we're right near an intersection that can be very congested at peak periods. So just how, from a precinct traffic management point of view, how we manage that.
Thank you, Mr Mayor.
Sorry, could you just speak into speak right into the microphone, because otherwise people can't hear.
Sure, thank you. Unfortunately, the traffic report that's been submitted with the application doesn't actually address that concern. All that it says is that the predicted traffic generation is reasonably low and is expected to be already on the surrounding road network, including passing traffic. In particular, any actual increase in traffic on the surrounding road network is expected to be within the daily variations of existing traffic volumes, and we do not believe that there will be any noticeable difference to the operation of surrounding intersections, including the Victoria Road Separation Street signalised intersection. The proposed access arrangements allow for simultaneous two-way access via Victoria Road as far as possible from the signalised intersection of Victoria Road and Separation Street. Furthermore, motorists would be able to drive to and from the site in a forwards direction, which is an improvement over existing conditions. Based on our assessments, we are satisfied that there will be no unreasonable safety, operational or amenity issues on the surrounding roads and intersections as a result of the proposed development.
Okay, councillors, there's no further questions. We have a recommendation.
If I can add to that, if it helps, there is a ramp which is about 12 meter plus going in, so there will be some storage for 4 or 5 cars going in. So with the volume of traffic, you're talking only about left turn. I think there is another 4 or 5 cars, so 8 cars really can accommodate before it intersect the intersection, if that's a concern.
So just to be clear, and I appreciate the additional commentary from officers and the CEO, I just would ask, in the assessment, it seems that the assessment suggests that there will be no noticeable change in relation to traffic on adjoining streets, but I would just ask again, in relation to the intersection of Victoria Road and Separation Street, I don't have the traffic report, obviously, but that seems like a fairly standard set of lines about local streets, and I just don't think this is a fairly standard situation. So I suppose I'm just wondering if the assessment is just purely about access and egress into the site rather than actual impact on the surrounding intersection. I appreciate that the only information you have there is the traffic report. I suppose the question would be whether any on-site assessment has taken place in relation to this site and the unusual traffic configuration that exists there. Or whether this is a desktop sort of assessment.
Officers.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe that they would have assessed both on-site ingress, egress and the impact on adjoining street networks. That's part of the assessment criteria.
Councillor Gregor.
Just a follow-up question to that, because that was one of the concerns that I had, given that it's a particular intersection there near, is that will the drop-off of children be from the road or from the site or from on-site? That is, will the cars be required to go on-site into the basement to drop off children, or will they drop off children from the road?
They have opportunity to do both. There is unrestricted parking, so they're providing 20 car parking spaces in the basement car park, and that's where they would be encouraged to drop off. Alternatively, there is pick-up drop-off spaces internally within the basement, so that is where they're encouraged to park. There is internal, within the basement car park, there is drop-off pick-up available, and that's where they would be encouraged to park.
Councillors.
Just a follow-up question. So, is that a condition that they're required to drop off children from within the site, or is it just simply that they're encouraged to do that?
It's labelled on the endorsed plan, so if this was to be approved, then the plans, the basement car park actually shows that as a condition. So that is the way that is a way that we enforce the parking within the basement level, is that it's actually noted on the plans.
Okay, councillors, no further comments. Councillor Lee has moved the recommendation. Seconded Councillor Williams. Councillor Lee, you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a fairly congested area, as other councillors have noted, but it is built on over consolidation of 2 blocks, and there are adequate on-site parking available for people to drop off. And as council officers noted, Victoria Road, along the length of Victoria Road, there are unrestricted parking further down to the south, so there are opportunities for parents to do pick up and drop off in the side of Victoria Road. This will generate some traffic. I do acknowledge that, but because being a childcare centre, there is no set time or set starting time and finishing time, unlike say a school. So hopefully that will mitigate the rush of dropping off and picking up as well, given people's different flexible working arrangement, given when they can achieve that. So it is and it's also an area that's undergoing some growth in terms of families, and demand on health and demand for childcare services also there. So it is a service that's needed, and I'm satisfied with the amount of parking that's provided both within this application site, but also off-street amenities to cater for the access and egress of the traffic to the site.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Councillor Williams, anything to add?
Just to say that yes, we are having a growing population, and that's great to see that the applicant has actually thought about the underground car parking for 20 vehicles, which is, I don't recall any daycare centres that have such a thing, and also having it outside where they can have, there's like 6.5 car spaces outside. So I understand it's It's on a main busy road, but I believe that, as my fellow councillors already mentioned, that drop-off and pick-up is not usually exactly the same time. It's not like a high school or primary school.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Any further councillors wish to speak? Councillor McCarthy.
I will speak in favour of the application, but I do so with some reservation about the arrangements. My primary concern in this is the issues around traffic management, and we can only rely upon the expert advice of officers in relation to this. We don't have the capacity to do independent traffic assessments here, but I do support this because we need more childcare places, but I do so with some reservation about how we think about the access and egress on this site. So it may be that there may need to be some rethinking around the parking and traffic arrangements in the close proximity, depending on how this plays out. I would see that this would be supported at VCAT quite strongly because it does tick all the other boxes, but I think Council's going to have to look very closely at and monitor the traffic situation at this site as this development goes forward, and on that basis I prefer to see the conditions that have been included there go forward rather than have any of those struck out at VCAT. So on that basis I'd support it as it is.
Councillor Walsh.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Can you stand? Oh no, sorry, stay seated.
I'm happy to stand if that would.
No, that's okay. No, be casual. It's all right.
Yeah, I'm in the same position as Councillor McCarthy. I think this overall is a supportable application. I do, and certainly need more childcare facilities in the area. And, speaking to residents today about the lack of childcare facilities in the area. So I certainly understand that, but obviously we do need to watch it because there are issues around traffic management and so on. And I certainly understand what could understand the point of the objector.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. If there's no further speakers, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation, please raise your hands. That's carried. Members of the gallery, Council decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that application. All parties will be notified of Council decision. Objectors will be also notified and provided with 21 days of appeal should they decide to go to VCAT and challenge Council's decision. Thank you. Next item we're considering is our 5.2 application for planning permit number 9, Cash Street, Kingsbury. Over to the officers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This application seeks approval for the construction of 4 double-storey dwellings. Dwellings 1 and 4 will be 3-bedroom dwellings, and dwellings 2 and 3 will be 2-bedroom dwellings. In accordance with the statutory requirement, each 2-bedroom dwelling will be provided with a single car space, and each 3-bedroom dwelling will be provided with 2 car spaces. The site is zoned General Residential Zone Schedule 2 and has a total area of 766 square metres. Each dwelling is provided with secluded private open space in the form of conventional ground floor open space. The application was advertised, receiving 14 objections, and the proposal was assessed against the relevant planning scheme controls and achieves a high standard of compliance. The proposal is therefore recommended for support, subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. Any speakers for this item? Kristen?
No speakers.
No speakers, okay. Over to councillors. Do we have any questions from councillors? If there are no questions, we have a recommendation there.
I just had a question.
Question, Councillor Greco.
To you, Chair. I just in looking at this particular application, I note that the adjacent properties, which are almost essentially the same size, have 3 dwellings on them. On one side there are 3 dwellings, and on the other side there are 2 dwellings. And I was just wondering, in terms of land size, whether this would constitute an overdevelopment.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So you're talking about the northern and the southern property boundaries, which are adjacent to existing dwellings. There will be a condition on the permit requiring a landscape plan, and there is sufficient area, particularly to the northern boundary, which will allow sufficient area of landscaping along that boundary. There is also some opportunity to provide landscaping along the concrete driveway to break up the hard paved area. That is considered to be adequate for this type of development in this area.
Okay, councillors, if there's no further questions, we have a recommendation there. Have someone move that, please. Councillor Villalon.
I do have a question, Mr.
Question,
Mayor.
Councillor Villalon.
Just to the officers through you. It's just in terms of, I'm just looking at the total area of units, Unit 2 and Unit 3, and I note that the ground floor for Unit 1 is, I think it's 46 square metres, and then the first floor is around 47. When we look at, just the question is, in terms of an appropriate size, even though there's no regulation around it, do we look at the first and ground and second floor combined, or because the floor space for the first floor, the ground floor, is actually quite small. It's less than 50 square metres.
There's no metric around the actual floor plates. What we look at is there enough open space? Are those up to setbacks sufficiently from adjoining property? So it's more those sorts of metrics that guide the actual sort of envelope, building envelope, as it were, not so much, you know, exactly how many square metres are on the ground or how many square metres are on the floor, because what they are end up being a function of, you know, what, like I said, are there setbacks, are there open space, all of those things, rather than specific square metrages.
Thanks.
Any further questions?
Happy to move the recommendation.
Councillor Greco.
I would go to move an alternate motion.
Councillor Williams, do you want to move the recommendation as is or not?
Yes.
Do I have a seconder for the recommendation? Moved by Councillor McCarthy. You wish to speak to it now, Councillor?
No, nothing further to say.
Councillor McCarthy, do you wish to speak to it? No. Any speakers against? Councillor
Chair,
Greco, now's your option.
I'll speak against, and I'll foreshadow that I have an alternate motion in relation to this. Look, I suppose my main objection to this particular application is that I believe that it's an overdevelopment for that particular site, but not only an overdevelopment for that particular site, but also I think it's an overdevelopment for that particular area. If you look at the end of that street, at the end of Cash Street there's a lot of development that's actually taken place. There's lots of other three dwellings on the adjacent properties to that site, and also further up the street there's much more development further up in the street. So I believe that I think we're reaching a saturation point in relation to Cash Street, and I think that having 4 additional units on that particular site will just tip it over the edge in terms of the amount of development that's occurred in that particular neighbourhood area. So on that basis, I'm not willing to support this. If the proposal was for a 3-unit development, I think that would be much more acceptable and would create less visual bulk and actually better blend in with that particular end of the street.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Any other speakers?
I speak against it, Mr.
You may speak, Councillor.
I speak against it. Just to reiterate what Councillor Greco is saying, I'm speaking against it because I do think that we've had a number of applications like this, and 3 units of reasonable size, preferably a combination of double-storey and single-storey, blends in well with the existing environment. As is pointed out, surrounding areas you'll have 3 units on the similar size blocks, and when you look at the actual floor space, even though I know it's not taken into consideration, but anything less than 50 square metres is stretching it, and I think what this application does is just stretch it a bit, and it's quantity over quality, and I think it'll be a far more suitable development or application if there were three units on site that were of reasonable size and could better reflect the surrounding areas, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Aguilar. If there's no further debate on the matter, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Members of the gallery, Council has decided to issue a notice of decision, technically granting a permit for that application. All parties have been notified of Council's decision. The objectors will be notified and provided with 21 days of appeal rights should they choose to go to VCAT. Next item we're considering, councillors, is 5.3, application for planning permit number 14, Birdwood Street in Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is for the construction of 4 double-storey dwellings on the land. The land is located within the General Residential Zone Schedule 2. There is a restrictive covenant on the title. It does restrict the excavation of the land except for the building of foundations. Therefore, the proposed development will not contravene this covenant. The application was advertised and 16 objections were received against this application. Objections are summarised on pages 45 through 46 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 46 through 49 of the agenda. The proposed development generally displays a high degree of compliance with the requirements of Clause 55 of the planning scheme. It provides adequate parking and open space areas, and its form, whilst contemporary, draws on some of the elements within the Birdwood Street streetscape. Some increases to the front setback and upper floor setbacks from adjoining properties are proposed by conditions to ensure that surrounding amenity is not unreasonably impacted. Therefore, approval is recommended as per conditions outlined on pages 39 through 44 of the agenda.
Thank you, Kristen. Do we have speakers for this item tonight?
We have Daniel DeFazio, the applicant, registered to speak to this application.
Okay. Daniel, if you're here, if you can please join us at the front table here and make your presentation. You have 5 minutes and the screen's here to help you. You may commence.
Good evening, councillors and attendees. Just wish to, as the applicant, wish to echo the comments of the council officers, noting that they seem to thoroughly review both the complementary and critical points of the application. Just further to that, just wish to note that we've already made a preliminary look at the proposed conditions that will be on any decision issued, and note that we are happy to comply with all of them. There's ability there to meet all those conditions which would further improve the development, and they're all quite reasonable, so that can be achieved. And that's all I really need to say at this stage. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. You may resume your seat in the gallery. We have an objector here who wants to present too.
No, we don't. There was an objector by the name of Jean Corelli, but an officer spoke to her later today and she said that she wasn't actually going to attend.
Okay, thank you for that. So there's no objector speaking. We therefore have questions from councillors now.
I just have a
Councillor
question
Greco.
through the chair. Just on page 53 of the report, where we look at the street setback, in terms of the standard, it says that the required setback is 8 metres, but there it states that it's 7.9 metres property, and we've said yes to the standard being met.
Yes, that is because the
Is that because of the condition?
Yes, because the condition basically fixes that issue. When you would say that the condition, the standard hasn't been met, is if you're accepting
The condition.
or if you're accepting that it meets the objective. And that's when we have an N and a Y to say that no, it hasn't met the standard, but yes, it's met the objective. In this instance, because we're actually forcing compliance with both the standard and the objective, it's considered both of them to be compliant.
Okay, thanks for that clarification.
Any further questions from Councillor McCarthy?
Just very quickly on page 53, I just note that the site coverage and the permeability are both listed as 34%. I'm just wanting to check whether that is correct, because that doesn't seem to add up from my perspective. And also looking at the maps as well, it seems to be that permeability might be actually higher than is professed. So.
ground floor plan. Yeah.
Okay, so site coverage is this first 34% and permeable surface are 34% as well. The difference here is that what the site coverage doesn't take into account is paved area total. So if you consider full site coverage and paved area, it's around 60 something percent. And then, probably about 66%, and permeable surface is 34%. So that's correct. It's because site coverage is solely the building footprint.
Yes.
It doesn't take into account the hard surface area.
So it's just by chance that the numbers
are
the same, but they are the correct numbers.
And
Okay.
there could also be rounding errors as well. Like one might be, 34.1 and the other one 34.9 or something like that. That's possible as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there's no further questions, we have a recommendation there. Move Councillor Lee, we have a seconder. Second, Councillor Williams. Councillor Lee, do you wish to speak?
Yes, it's a fairly, it is a relatively modest one compared to the land size. It's got 886 square metres of land. The developer did seek to maximise the site, unlike some of the other adjoining properties further down to the south. There is adequate provision for cars to travel in and out in a forward direction to allow for adequate turning of the cars. And the layout is reasonably conventional. It's very conventional, so there are no real grounds for refusal on this one. And I'm also satisfied with the conditions placed by our officers to accommodate for the setback of the front of the property as well.
Thank you very much for that, Councillor Lee. Councillor Williams, anything to add? There's nothing to add there. Any further comments from councillors? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried, and we'll note that Councillor Walsh was absent for that vote. Item 5.4, members of gallery, that item has been deferred to another meeting, so like I said before, if you've come for that won't be considered tonight, so that's not on tonight's agenda. That's been deferred. We'll now go to item 5.5. Application for planning permit for number 2 to Loddon Avenue Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is for the construction of 4 double-storey dwellings. The site is zoned General Residential Zone Schedule 2. There is no restricted covenant on the title. This application was advertised and 15 objections were received against the application. Objections are outlined on page 80 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 80 through 83. The proposed development generally displays a high degree of compliance with the requirements of 55 of the Darwin Planning Scheme. It does provide adequate car parking and open space areas. It has adequate upper floor setbacks from adjoining properties to ensure that surrounding amenity is not impacted. While the form is quite contemporary, the officer's report on page 84 outlines in detail how the proposed development draws on elements of the Long Street's streetscape while allowing for contemporary design response. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions outlined on pages 75 through 79 of the agenda.
Thank you, Chris. And do we have speakers for this item?
Chris McKenzie, the applicant, has registered to speak for this item.
Thank you, Chris. If you can join us at the front here, please, sir. Chairs here waiting for you, and you've got the timepiece on the screen here to help you with your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. This site's in your general residential 2 zone, which is, as I said to you before, the zone that you've designated as your preferred zone for this type of 2-storey townhouse development with courtyard open space. So the traditional design and the layout having ground floor, living rooms and then upstairs bedrooms. As the officer noted, the architectural style is a little bit contemporary. This site is the first site in off Plenty Road, and you're very familiar that along Plenty Road particularly we're proposing quite substantial change with much bigger buildings than these 2-storey townhouses. So many of those are of contemporary form. So it's an area that's going to see some change and should be comfortable with this architecture. 2-storey townhouses is an appropriate introduction to this location. the overall site coverage is 43%, so this is an overall layout that is not sought to push the site too far. The individual townhouses are approximately 130 to 140 square metres, so really noting they are not particularly small townhouses. They're comfortable, ordinary sized townhouses rather than townhouses that are trying to squeeze too much into too small a space. It becomes a very conventional layout with driveway down one side, open space yards down the other side, bedroom well centred, separation between first floors, well off side boundaries. When you go to the officer's assessment rest code, it's a clean set of yeses in terms of the compliance. There's only one no, which is the overlooking. It says to report the report. But the report tells us there is full compliance, and that's a correct assessment in the report that all of the upstairs windows have proper design and screen treatment. There is no overlooking. So what we're left with is a very conventional layout for a site like this. Number 6, Loddon Avenue, 2 over from this site, already has 4 townhouses developed on it relatively recently. So this layout is entirely in keeping with what has already been approved and developed right and wrong. You'll be familiar with this location, 50 metres to Plenty Road, directly opposite Sunny Hill. It's an area that's very well suited for the type of development, and the officers report an assessment of a very highly compliant design should satisfy you. It's appropriate to approve. So thank you.
Thank you very much. If you can resume your place in the gallery, we'll now go to councillors to ask questions. Any questions from councillors? If not, there's a recommendation there.
Happy to move the recommendation.
Move Councillor Williams. Have a seconder. Councillor Walsh. Councillor Williams, you wish to speak? Councillor Walsh, nothing? Okay, if there's no comment from councillors, I'll put that straight to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That item is carried. Members of the gallery, council will decide to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that matter. Objectors, those who have notified council of their objection, will have 21 days of appeal right to go to VCAT should they choose to do so. Next item we're considering is 5.6, application for a planning permit number 24 Lucille Avenue in Reservoir. Over to the officers, thank you.
Thank you. This application is for the construction of 3 double-storey dwellings. The site is zoned general residential Schedule 2. There is no restrictive covenant on the title for the subject land. This application was advertised and 11 objections were received against the application. Objections are outlined on page 95 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 96 and 97 of the agenda. The proposed development generally displays reasonable compliance with the requirements of Clause 55, with the exception of the street setback, which has been identified in the officer's report. Please refer to page 99 of the agenda. And it is principally on the basis that the street setbacks in Lucille Avenue are varied, and that sufficient area for a front garden is maintained, which is consistent with our neighbourhood character requirements. Private open space for dwelling 2 is slightly below the minimum 40 square metre requirement. However, this is being required to be rectified by condition 1B of on page 91 of the agenda. The proposal provides adequate car parking in open space areas and has adequate overflow setbacks from adjoining properties. The form is quite traditional and draws on existing elements in the Lucille Avenue streetscape. Therefore, approval is recommended, subject to conditions outlined on pages 91 through 94 of the agenda.
Thank you, Chris. And questions from councillors? Are there any questions?
No.
No immediate objectors, as you see from the report. If not, I'll need someone to move the recommendation. Move Councillor Walsh, second Councillor Williams. Councillor Walsh, anything to say? Nothing from Councillor Williams. I'll therefore put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of the gallery, council has decided to issue a notice of decision, technically approved for that item. All parties have been notified of council decision, the applicant and the objectors. Should objectors choose to go to VCAT, they'll have 21 days of receiving council's notification. Next item of consideration is 5.7, application for planning permit number 25, Loddon Avenue Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application seeks approval to construct 4 double-storey dwellings. Each dwelling has 2 bedrooms and access to a single car space. Secluded private open space is provided to the rear of each dwelling with areas between 28 square metres and 44.6 square metres. The application was advertised and 11 objections were received. The concerns raised by objections are detailed in the officer's report on pages 111 and 115 of the agenda. The site sits within the general residential Schedule 2 and has a total area of 705 square metres. The report presented before the committee concludes that the application generally has a high level of compliance with the planning scheme and the procedural application being a modest clause remains unlocked. Council has recommended report subject to conditions outlined on pages 100 and 610 of the agenda.
Thank you for that. Do we have speakers for this item, Kristen?
Yes, we have again Chris Mackenzie, who is speaking on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Chris. You know the drill.
So the equipment amongst us will pick up that this is in the same street as the application that I was just talking to about 5 minutes ago. So we're going on relatively close to Plenty Road, relatively close to Summer Hill, same zone in general. To essentially a similar type of proposal, 4 2-bedroom, 2-storey townhouses. This one has a more traditional design with pitched roof elements. Ground floor roof, wide weight, first floor is much more typical of what you'd be seeing in terms of most of the tenants coming through. One driveway, all of the buildings are well centred, they have full-sized yards, the living rooms are on ground floor, the bedrooms are on first floor. It's very well compliant. There's 49% site coverage, so again, really not trying to push anywhere up into that 50 or 60% that the zone will allow. Each of the units is 120 square metres, so again, you're in that range that you should see as a comfortable size for a 2-bedroom townhouse. And going through the exercise, just want to say to you, the officer's assessment is thorough, it's appropriate. This is essentially the type of development fully compliant that your plan is being approved for in this location. It's proximity to all those infrastructure facilities. It's consistent with what's in this right now and what you've just approved tonight on that very side. So I think this one to you as well.
Thank you, Chris. If you could resume your seat. Questions from councillors? Do we have any questions from councillors?
Yes, through the chair, I do have a few
Grego.
questions. One is in relation to, if we look at page 119 of the report, there are a few things that don't meet the standards, and if we can go through them one by one. The first one is in relation to standard B14, the access and egress. Could we just get a bit of more of an explanation of how that would work in practical terms, and how the applicant will address that particular issue?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The officer has already picked up, is obviously picked up on those areas of non-compliance.
Excuse me, could you speak up, please? So that
the officers have obviously already picked up on those areas of non-compliance, and condition 1F requires swept path assessments demonstrating the 85th percentile vehicles. So that will go some way in terms of addressing the issues of standard B14 and standard B15. So condition 1F.
just as a supplementary to that, could you just further elaborate on what that means in relation to a swept path assessment demonstrating a B85th percentile? What would that mean in practical terms?
So it essentially means that it must comply with Australian standards. So that swept path has a requirement of Australian standards that is required to be met, and they're not allowed to reduce any of the floor area in order to meet that Australian standard.
Okay. If I can, just
yes,
two other quick ones. Again, on page 119, in relation to parking location, can you just unpack a little bit why it does not meet the standard there and what's been proposed?
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The reason why that does not comply is, if you'll see on page 117, the southeast facing kitchen window of Unit 1 is set back from the access way by 0.5 metres and does not have sill heights of 1.4 metres above the access way, which is the requirement of the standard. A condition of the approval will require this window to be treated with thick glazing to limit vehicle noise into the room. And that is addressed by condition 1B.
Okay, any further questions from councillors? If not,
If
Councillor
not, I have an
Lee?
alternate motion to...
Councillor Greco?
Yeah, so
Carry
I have an alternate motion, and the motion reads as follows: that council refuse the application with grounds as follows. 1, the proposal will result in an adverse visual bulk impacts upon the adjacent properties. 2, vehicular access for the garage associated with dwelling 4 is constrained and does not appear to facilitate adequate access and egress to the site in accordance with clause 52.06 of the Darebin Planning Scheme. And 3rd, the proposal is an overdevelopment of the site. So move as follows.
Have a seconder? If there's no seconder, that item will lapse.
Happy to move recommendation.
Hang on, if there's no seconder, that item has lapsed. Councillor Greco, we will therefore go with the original recommendation. Councillor Williams, do you wish to move the original recommendation?
Yeah.
Have a seconder for that? Councillor Lee. Councillor Williams, do you wish to speak?
Nothing further.
Councillor Lee?
It's a very conventional layout, and the conditions satisfy the conditions placed on the application in order to ensure quality development.
Any speakers to it? Councillor Greco?
I'll speak against that.
Speak against.
Just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, I think I made my points clear when I was asking questions, and also when I read out my alternate motion. Unfortunately, it was not seconded. But I think the main concern with this particular development, if we look at the site size, it's just barely over 700 square metres, and we're putting 4 dwellings on that particular site. That's very tight for a land size of that of those dimensions. Also, as it's been noted, and I pointed out in the question when questions were asked, that there were a few issues associated with this application not meeting particular standards. Whilst I appreciate that certain conditions have been built into to try and make it comply, but I'm not confident that that actually meets the test of making this particular application a worthwhile application. But basically, I think it's an overdevelopment. I think the visual bulk of this particular application is not suitable for that particular area.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. If there's no further speakers, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the recommendation as listed, please raise your hands. Those against? That's carried. Members of Gallery, Council has decided to issue a notice of decision for that application. Technically, a permit has been granted. All parties will be notified of council decisions. Objectors will be given 21 days of appeal rights should they choose to go to VCAT. Thank you. Next item to consider is 5.8, 27 to 29 Loddon Avenue Reservoir. Very popular street tonight. Kristen, over to you.
Thank you. This application is for the construction of 7 double-storey dwellings over 2 sites. The site is zoned general residential Schedule 2. There is a restrictive covenant on the title of the land. It restricts the manufacture and winning of bricks and the excavation of the land other than for the purpose of erecting building. It's not considered that this application will fulfil the terms of those covenants. The application was advertised and 15 objections were received against the application. Objections are outlined on pages 130 through 131 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 131 through 133 of the agenda. The proposed development generally displays a high degree of compliance with the requirements of clause 55 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, with the exception of the street setback, which has been justified in the officer's report. Please see page 135 of the agenda, principally on the basis that the street setbacks in Loddon Avenue are varied and that the setback is consistent with those outlined in Council's character study for that site. It provides adequate residential car parking. There is a proposed waiver of 1 visitor space, which was assessed and supported by Council's Transport Management and Planning Unit. There are adequate open space areas and appropriate upper floor setbacks from adjoining properties to ensure that surrounding amenity is not unreasonably impacted. The form of the development is traditional and draws from elements in the Long Avenue streetscape while still allowing contemporary design response. Therefore, approval is recommended, subject to condition outlined on pages 124 through 129 of the agenda.
Thank you, Chris. And speakers on this item?
Chris Mackenzie, again, is the applicant.
Thank you, Chris Mackenzie. If you can join us at the front table here, please. Welcome back. You've got 5 minutes.
Thanks. This is the last of the 3 applications that I'm speaking to tonight. It's really relatively coincidental that they all happen to be in the same street. I've never had this happen before. I'm assuming perhaps that the planning officers, having had a series of Logan Avenue applications in the system, decided to bring them all up to you.
Well, there's a first for everything, isn't there, Chris?
There is, there is. So you've just approved 2 sites where individual sites have had 4 townhouses each on them. This is a double lot, so it's about 1,400 square metres, it's 1,389, so it's just under 2 by 700. Quite often when you have 2 lots side by side, there's an opportunity to develop additional lots, but what you actually have here is 7 dwellings. So as I said, there's been 4 on each of those other individual lots. This is a total of 7 over 2 lots. So the applicant has not chosen to look to increase the number of dwellings. What they have done is introduce more diversity. So we have 5 3-bedroom, larger scale townhomes that are suitable for families, and then 2 2-bedroom dwellings. So across the applications that you've seen tonight in this immediate area, this one introduces a point of difference with some diversity of some larger homes using the fact that they have the 2 sites together to be able to accommodate the total of 7, but to still work through and provide a well-balanced and well-centred layout that provides parking up through the middle and in yards and landscaping around the outside. There's 4 dwellings along the northern side with yards all along the north, so that all those living rooms get good sun and the open space yards get good sun. Along the south there are only 3, and the layout still provides for 2 of those lots to have the yard on the inside so that they open to the north, so they're going in the open space and really get good north sun. And one in the middle has its yard on the side, so it's still open to the north. So on a double lot, they've done very well to make sure that every one of these units will get a good aspect with good sun to the living rooms and the yards. And then on the first floor, bedrooms with good breaks, well separated, sort of recessed style boundaries, separation between the various parts of the built form. Relatively conventional design, pitched roofs, 30-metre frontage with 2 crossovers, so you have 20 metres of curb on the frontage for parking for visitors and the like. And as the officers said, there's ample room around the site for the front yard, side yards, and then you also notice the first floor relatively small compared to the ground floor, so good recession and setbacks off the ground floor, so the first floor are not too dominant. So clearly Logan Avenue Street, well positioned, and the zoning and the policies you have are supporting change here. You're clearly seeing that change. It's already in the street. There's 8 or 10 townhouse sites already. There's been 2 more tonight, and this is a third proposed change. Again, the officers have done a thorough analysis. This is a layout again, slightly different to the other ones that have got a little bit more balance and diversity in the units themselves. But again, properly assessed by the officers, highly compliant. The particular conditions the officers have put on to ensure full compliance. There's a couple of small changes to fences to make sure that all of the yards are fully compliant. So the conditions that they have proposed have come from that thorough assessment.
Thank you very much, Chris. If you can resume your seat in the gallery. Questions from councillors? Councillor McCarthy.
Just a request to the applicants to all do the developments at the same time and give the residents a break for the rest of the period. Can they coordinate all 3 developments at the same time? Is that possible? Can we make that a condition?
No. Any other questions? Councillor Lou?
Just notice there's an error in one of the map and one of the plans. A04 is clearly not part of the development. So I just want to know, just for officers, what is in the A04? What is in Plan A4 that's attached to this application? Because what we got is a different address, so there's an error in that.
Oh, I see. Yeah, it appears to be a site. This is a site establishment and feature survey.
Okay.
Oh, I see. Thank you. Yeah, that counts as it's a local. It's a completely
Different location. That's okay. I can see the floor plan easily. I just want to know what A4 is.
So this is what's called a site establishment and feature survey.
So
it's
weird.
obviously just for a different site, but it's not.
Yep.
The relevant information is actually contained on the plan.
No, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's no questions, we have a recommendation. Move Councillor Williams. We have a seconder.
Happy to second that.
Councillor Walsh. Councillors wish to speak to that?
I just want to say, look, it's a good sized land. It's demographically, it's close to loads of amenities, especially transport, activity centre, and it's nice to actually see larger units that accommodates 3 bedrooms. So it's great to see.
Okay.
Look, we've got a pretty big agenda tonight, so I think it's
Okay.
appropriate not to say anything.
Thank you, Councillor Walsh. I'll put that to a vote then. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of the gallery, council has decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that application. All parties will be notified of council decision. Objectors will also have 21 days of appeal rights should they choose to go to VCAT. Next item we're considering is 5.9, 33 Wilson Boulevard Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is to vary a restrictive covenant to allow for more than one dwelling to be constructed on the land. The site is in the general residential zone Schedule 1 this time. The application was advertised and 13 objections were received. However, no beneficiaries have objected. Objections are outlined on page 146 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 146 through 147 of the agenda. Section 60, subpart 5 of the Planning and Environment Act says that the responsible authority must not grant a permit which allows the removal or variation of a restriction, which this is, unless it is satisfied that the owner of any land benefited by the restriction will be unlikely to suffer any detriment of any kind, including any perceived detriment, as a consequence of the removal or variation of the restriction. So even though no beneficiaries have objected, council must turn its mind, and it's a very high bar that is set. We must be satisfied that the beneficiaries will be unlikely to suffer any detriment of any kind, and that's outlined on page 148 of the agenda, and it's involved and underlined. So, in addition to that, section clause 5202 of the Darwin Planning Scheme says that council can consider impacts to persons who may be affected by the proposed variation to the covenant, but that are not necessarily beneficiaries. So we do have objectors, so there is also something that has flagged that there are other people who are potentially affected. In addition, the way given that the covenant is proposed to be varied and there's no specific proposal associated with it, in some respects it's very difficult to say, to confidently say that no one will be affected, because any permutation of development, so you vary the covenant, any permutation of development, obviously in accordance with the legislation, but any permutation of development can be forward. So for those reasons, because the bar is set so high and there is such uncertainty, for those reasons, refusal is recommended as outlined on page 144 of the agenda.
Thank you, Kristen, for that detailed explanation. Councillor Viola.
No, I'm just happy to
move the refusal.
If there are no...
Second to Councillor Williams. There's no discussion. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Members of Government, Council decided to refuse that application based on the comments made by our officer, and all parties will no doubt be notified of Council's decision. Next item we're considering is 5.10, application for planning permit number 4547 Victoria Road in Northcote. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application seeks approval to construct a double-storey dwelling to the rear of 2 existing dwellings. As you'll note in the Res Code assessment, it achieves full compliance. I will note, however, the one area of non-compliance is with regard to clause 52.06, which is car parking, and that is as a result of dwelling 1, which is not provided with a car space. Page 164 of the agenda deals with the reasons and rationale for supporting the waiver. I would note that the site is located on a corner and there is on-street parking by way of 5 angled car spaces on Thompson Street. The application was advertised and 17 objections were received. Objections summarised in the agenda. Each of the dwellings provides conventional style secluded private open space at ground floor level, and the site is zoned general residential Schedule 2. And as above and within the officer's report within the agenda, the proposal has been assessed against the relevant planning scheme controls and achieves a high standard of compliance, as we said, with the exception of clause 52.06. And therefore, the proposal is therefore recommended for support subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. Speakers for this item. Kristen, I understand there's a speaker. Thank you. Daniel, if you can join us at the front here, please. Thanks, Daniel. You have 5 minutes.
Again, just to echo the council players' comments and noting that this application is subsequent to a previous one a couple of years back that went through the process and was denied at VCAT, at council, and VCAT upheld council decision. Based on the comments made by council at that time and the VCAT, all those recommendations and guidance has been heeded, and that's formed this application and led to leading council to support this application thus far. Those comments from VCAT revolved around some of the form of the building, the proposed new dwelling, as well as supporting the car parking waiver, noting what's been said tonight about on-street parking being available, and the removal of those on-street parks to create a new crossover to actually provide parking on the property itself would actually be a net loss realistically. So that's all stemming from that VCAT decision, which means have thus far run a bit smoother. Again, have looked through the proposed conditions. There's really only one that relates to a plan change, and having to adhere to that, it only affects the amenity of the new dwelling. There's no impacts on the neighbouring dwellings, both on our property and neighbouring. So, in summary, happy to go with the conditions proposed, and nothing further to add.
Thank you for that. Okay, over the councillors for any questions. Are there any questions from councillors?
Just to
Councillor
confirm, there was no objector listed to speak, is that
That's
correct?
what I understand. Kristen, Steve, no?
No, only the applicant.
Okay.
Okay.
Questions?
I'll move the recommendation.
There's no questions. Councillor Lee has moved the recommendation with a seconder. Councillor Greco, any speakers to it?
No, it's pretty
speakers.
straightforward.
I'll therefore put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is carried. Councillors have decided to support the recommendation of the officers there and grant a notice, issue a notice of decision with that application. All parties have been notified. Objectors will be having their right of report to VCAT. Should they choose to do so, by 21 days. That takes care of volume 1. We go to volume 2 now. Next item we'll look at is 5.11, 56 James Street in Preston. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application seeks approval to construct 3 double-storey dwellings Each dwelling will include 3 bedrooms. The site is zoned general residential zone 2 and has a total area of 635 square metres. The application was advertised and 14 objections were received. Each of the dwellings provide conventional residential open spaces between 40 to 50 square metres. If you have a look through the Western section, it achieves the majority of the standards of objectives. And therefore, council officer has assessed this application against the relevant plans been controlled and has recommended the application for support subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. We have speakers for this item. Kristen, I understand, yes?
Yes, we have Gary Whittington on
Gary.
behalf of the applicant.
Thank you. Gary, if you can join us at the front here. Welcome. You've got 5 minutes to present too. Just keep your eye on the screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor and councillors. As you know, with this site, it's in a general residential zone. There is no overlays to the site. It's approximately 450 metres from the Gilbert Road number 11 tram. So it's in a good location, close to infrastructure in terms of supporting medium density housing. You heard importantly that they are 3-bedroom dwellings, so providing appropriate accommodation for the needs of Darebin. We note that the permit applicant has worked very closely with the council planning officer in resolving any issues. The design is highly compliant with Res Code. Importantly, there is the first floor level is highly articulated. There are significant breaks in terms of the first floor level, and the design of it has ensured that there is no unreasonable off-site amenity impacts to adjoining properties. That's in terms of relating to overlooking and overshadowing. And overall, the site coverage again is well below the 60% permeability is higher in terms of what the minimum requirements are. And overall, as it has advised, it's a highly compliant application and something that is worthy of support. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Okay. No other speakers for that item, so we'll go to questions from councillors. Any questions?
I'll move the recommendation for no.
No questions. Councillor Lee has moved the recommendation. Councillor Williams has seconded. Any speakers to it?
Just before you did, sorry,
Councillor McCarthy.
I just had a question, which I meant to ask a moment ago, just in relation to the areas of non-compliance by standard under the Clause 55 assessment, whether they were all brought into compliance, or which ones were brought into compliance as per conditions. So which were conditioned into compliance? I refer specifically to do with the side and rear setbacks and the parking location.
Side and rear setbacks were not addressed in conditions of the planning permit. They were on page 181, however, I refer you to that, page 181 of the agenda, deals with on balance. Despite a small area of non-compliance, it was considered to be reasonable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. So we've had a move at Councillor Lee, second Councillor Williams. No other questions or comments or discussion? I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Members of the Gallery Council decided to issue a notice of decision, technically grant a permit for that application. All parties be notified. Objectors will have 7 days of appeal rights should they choose to go to VCAT. Okay, next item we're considering is 5.12, 9 Smith Street Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. 9 Smith Street Reservoir seeks approval to construct 5 dwellings. This application seeks a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom dwellings. Each 2-bedroom dwelling will be provided with a single car space, and each 3-bedroom dwelling will be provided with 2 car spaces. The proposal seeks approval to waive the visitor car space, which is required for a private dwelling development. The site is zoned general residential, Schedule 2, and has a total area of 892 square metres. The application was advertised and 16 objections were received. We note that open space is provided in the form of ground floor open space areas for dwellings 1 and 5, and first floor terraces for dwellings 2 to 4. The proposal has been assessed against the relevant planning scheme controls and achieves the highest standard of compliance. It is therefore recommended for support, subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. Do we have any speakers for this item?
Paul Wilson, an objector, is registered to speak.
Paul here, if you can join us at the front here, Paul. Thank you very much. You've got 5 minutes. Take your time.
Thank you, Chairman. Basically, we're going through this the second time. Previously, in 2012, we've done this before. Basically, this block is overdeveloped. 5 units on this property is just too much. Basically, since I've been living in this, I've lived in Redwood basically all my life. Last 12 years I've lived in this street, and about 7 blocks have been done. All have been single dwellings, 3 and 2 bedroom units. To put 5 units on this is just too overdeveloped. There is a block next door to me at number 13, which is the 2 double story units. It actually blocks off most of my sun in the winter time. My backyard goes green because of the sunlight. Now, putting these 5 units up next to the door to me, it doesn't affect my son, but it will affect the people next door, which have only just built 2 units on that, 2 single units. So, my proposal is basically it's overdeveloped. You'll soon have objectives, basically, and I haven't pushed a lot of vehicles this time. I'm just basically just coming to say, well, it's overdeveloped. I think you need to knock it on the head and just hopefully just get them to put in 3 units. At least, just keep the street at low density. I'm not trying to tell you, what should be done. I know they're going to put their own request in, but as people in the street, I've been around to see everyone sort of like to keep the street unified in that sense. Parking wise, it's affecting our streets because there's so many units in other streets. Elsie Street, Hickford Street has just had 7 units put on 2 blocks, just like before. Johnson Street, all they're near the shops. We're putting all these huge units in. More units are going next to where the old garage used to be in Johnson Street. They're just going to be units and street car parking is just going to be too much. And traffic, not so much traffic going through there. You're trying to get through the area and you've just got too many little diversions all the time because there's too many cars there, and we've got a zigzag between, traffic. It's just going tonight and trying to get through different streets. And going out night, I'm going home. That's really all I'm saying. I just hope you can listen to what I'm saying to you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Okay, can you resume your seat? Questions from councillors? Councillor McCarthy.
Look, I'm just a bit puzzled by this development. I'd just like to understand whether there's been a change in the ownership of the site, because just looking at the planning history here, we've had permits approved, we've refused, it just seems to be this pattern stop-start. So can we just get some indication here, has there been are officers aware of changes of ownership in this site that's resulted in permits for 5 units being approved and then lapsed? Because I just don't quite understand what's gone on here.
Kristen, bit of a history summary for us.
Yeah, it's the changes in ownership of the site is not something that we're necessarily tuning to. I mean, obviously they're in council's records, but yeah, it's not quite clear. You're right, it does seem to have quite a history there. But I'm at a loss to say why that is exactly. But sometimes people, I mean, planning is very speculative, so sometimes people do get permits with the express purpose of not building the development, but simply selling the land with value added to it. So, that can sometimes be the explanation, but I am speculating.
So just as a follow-up to that, the current permit is valid until July for a 3 double-storey dwelling. The previous attempt to do a 5-storey five double-storey dwellings was refused at VCAT. In terms of the differences between what was previously applied for and what has been applied for here, which the objector made reference to, I mean, I'm not privy to the detail of the previous application at VCAT apart from what's in here, but are we seeing a very similar application to what was refused at VCAT? Is it that the zoning has changed, or?
The zoning new application on its merits. So in some respects, it's not directly about, given the time elapsed, so it's not a direct repeat. In some respects, it's not exactly like what that particular proposal is. This proposal needs to stand and fall on its own merits.
Yeah, I suppose just if I can, I'm just conscious of the previous situation. Planning Committee had approved a 5-storey that was overturned by VCAT. I'm just concerned about the potential for that to occur again if we were to entertain this. So that's probably where the line of logic of where I'm going here. I don't want us to. Yeah. I'm not sure of the background to that decision. I wasn't on the Planning Committee that year.
Councillor Lee.
Yes, just again going back to page 195 about the current permit which allows for 3 double and 1 single storey. Well, does council have an option purely just to enforce that current valid permit without having to approve yet another permit? Can you have more than, so in other words, can you have more than one permit available on our development?
Absolutely you can. You cannot force someone to act on a permit. What would happen if you have 2 valid permits? Once you actually acted on one permit, that's
the other one
expires. And then the other one will eventually expire. But yeah, you cannot force someone to act on a particular permit. Sure.
And just a follow-up question. I noticed that units 2, 3 and 4 in this particular development are all reverse living, and I don't see any closed major activity centres nearby. Are you able to elaborate whether there are any major activity centres nearby that justifies that reverse living arrangement?
So the Reservoir Activity Centre, which would be probably the closest major activity centre, is 1.2 kilometres to the south.
Right, okay. 1.2.
Questions, councillors? If not, there's recommendations. An alternative. Councillor Greco.
I just had a question in relation to the setbacks, and I note that some of the setbacks are do not meet the standard. Again, just to get some clarification in regards to whether the conditions actually placed in this application will actually make the application meet those standards or not.
I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I was looking at the correct report, but when you say which setbacks don't meet the standard, I just wanted to understand.
So I note there on page 208 that the street setback is it hasn't been met, and I'm just wondering whether the conditions that are in that form part of this application.
No, because if you look at page 203 of the report, the non-compliance with the street setback has been justified. And what it shows is that so what you have is a standard setback. The setback to 1 and 1 is slightly shorter than the standard, and the setback to 1 and 2 well exceeds it. So the officer has justified that, and those paragraphs are set out on page 203 of the report.
Through the Chair, if there's no other questions, I'm prepared to move an alternate motion.
Councillor McCarthy, do you have any other questions?
Oh, look, I just wanted to. I know I've asked the question before about the previous application for 5 that was refused by VCAT. I just wanted to see if we had any information about the grounds upon which it was refused by VCAT, because I'm not clear if those issues have been addressed in this new application. So I just wanted to know if the difference is just time. That's all. So, yeah, that's not available. Okay, thank you. I appreciate that.
Councillor Greco.
Yeah, look, I have an alternate motion, Chair.
Please.
It's a bit lengthy, but I'll just take a bit of time to read it out for the benefit of councillors in the gallery. The alternate motion is that to issue a notice of refusal to grant a planning permit comprising the following grounds. 1, The proposal is contrary to neighbourhood character design objectives contained in the Darebin Neighbourhood and Character Study and Precinct Guidelines reference document in clause 22.02 of the Darebin Planning Scheme. In particular, the development does not respond appropriately to the following elements. First element is vegetation. The dwellings do not provide sufficient setback to accommodate trees. Second point is in relation to sitting. The development does not provide sufficient space for front garden. The development does not retain substantial space for landscaping. Unit 1, built to the side boundary, does not respect the prevailing rhythm and spacing of detached dwellings in the area. And the third point is in relation to height and building form, that the upper floors of Unit 1 and are not sufficiently offset from the ground floor facade to create a recessive two-storey form in a street where single-storey dwellings prevail. And the second ground is that the development does not comply with clause 55.03-1, standard B6 of the Darebin Planning Scheme. The development is not set back sufficiently from the front boundary. And the third ground is that the development does not comply with clause 55.03-10 of the Darebin Planning Scheme standard B15, in that the south-facing habitable room window of Unit 2 is not set back sufficiently from the shared accessway. The affected room will not have the desired amenity outcomes. And the fourth and final ground is that the proposal is an overdevelopment of the site.
Happy to second it, Mr.
Second,
Mayor.
Councillor Greco. Councillor Valola. Councillor Greco, you've got the
I
floor.
think it was quite self-explanatory, but I suppose my only additional comments to this particular application is clearly an overdevelopment. As one of the objectors said, I think it really needs to be knocked on the head, and that because trying to squeeze so many dwellings on the one site creates all the complications that it does create in regards to setbacks. So on that basis, Chair, I'm proposing that we refuse this particular application.
Thank you, Councillor Greco. Second, Councillor Valola, wish to add?
Nothing further to add, Mr. Mayor.
Any other speakers? If there's not, I'll put that to a vote of the alternative recommendation to refuse the application. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Members of the Government, Council has decided to issue a refusal for that application. No notice of decision or will be granted. All parties were notified of Council's decision. The applicant will have 60 days of appeal rights to go to VCAT once they receive Council notification. All objectors will be notified too of Council's decision to refuse that application. If that application does proceed to VCAT, Council will defend its decision to refuse the application. So you're all clear on that. Thank you. Next item considering is 5.13, application for 34 Don Street Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application seeks approval to construct 3 double-storey dwellings to the rear of an existing dwelling, so therefore taking the total dwellings to 4 on the site. The existing dwelling will have 3 bedrooms and 2 undercover car parking spaces, whilst dwellings 2 to 4 will be 2-bedroom dwellings. Dwelling 1 has secluded private open space contained to within a balcony measuring 17.5 square metres, and dwellings 2 to 4 will have conventional ground floor open space measuring between 35 and 55 square metres. The site is zoned general residential Schedule 1 and measured in an area of 865 square metres. The application was advertised and received 23 objections. The objections are summarised in pages 220 to 221 of the agenda. And on balance, the proposal has been assessed against the relevant planning scheme controls and generally achieves a high standard of compliance and therefore is recommended for support subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. Okay, speakers for this application.
We have Paul Farinaci and George Collier on behalf of the applicants.
Okay, if you guys are here, if you can take the front there, please, gentlemen. Are you both going to speak? Just, okay, you've got 5 minutes or 2.5 minutes each.
Yeah, basically what we've got here is a full dwelling development in the land and 65 acres of land, which is fairly reasonable for that size allotment. 23 objections may sound a lot, but we're breaking that into 4 categories. The first 5 of the objections are not even considered, no consideration of the Darabin planning. So they're basically impact of construction, loss of views, reduction of property values, dependence on non-economic property, and pressure on service infrastructure are not consideration that the planning scheme takes into account. 2 of the objections were factually incorrect. One of them was about reduction of car parking requirements. The proposal fully adheres to the car parking requirements of the Darabin planning scheme, as in 2 car parks for the 3-bedroom dwelling and 1 car park each for the 2-bedroom dwellings. And another objection was that there were additional 4 crossovers. There'll actually be no additional crossovers because the property has a right of way down the side of 34 Don Street and the next door property, which is 96 Darabin Boulevard. So the existing right of way of Don Street will be used. Now, there were numerous further objections which have little or no merit. I'll briefly touch on them. Oversupply of 1 and 2-bedroom dwellings. I mean, in a society where we've got scarce land in the inner parts of Melbourne, we actually want dwellings that are more dense so people that can be affordable housing. Impact of traffic. 3 cars coming in and out of right of way 2 or 3 times a day is not going to really have any more on the right of way, more on Don Street. Waste management is in a program will affect amenity. There is a dedicated area required on the product for waste bins. As for street amenity, 6 additional bins, given 2 already there for the front dwelling, 6 additional bins overnight on the street will not affect amenity. There was one objection that was really weird. Number of objections indicates the scale of negative social effect on community. Objections based on objection are really weird. So what I'm really getting here is that probably a lot of these objections are just for the sake of objection to development full stop. Will not provide affordable accommodation, that's subjective. Rents are determined by demand and supply. Noise, the planning officer has reported in the report that there will be no first increase in noise level. No parking on the right of way. The right of way is no standing at any time for the moment. If people, especially on the 96 or Boulevard, are parking there, that's probably a council issue to enforce no standing. So, in our opinion, there's only 3 objections that had some merit, and they were overlooking, which the Darabin Town Planner has put conditions on the approval which we're happy to accept. Status may be converted to require additional parking. Again, the Darabin planner has said that firstly the status are small, but secondly they should be open to the staircase, which will prevent them being bedrooms. That's another condition we're happy with. And the third one is removal of trees and no replacement planning. The Darabin, as the planner has sought a condition on the proposal, we will provide we will submit a detailed landscaping plan to the council satisfaction. So in summary, we believe that this is a fair development for both the area and to meet the social need for housing.
Okay, thank you very much. If you can resume your seats in the gallery. No other speakers for this item? No, okay. Over to councillors for questions. Any questions? Councillor Lee.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to get a sense of understanding from our staff, because by retaining the front of it, first of all, that made road, is that a continuation of Don Street or Darabin Boulevard, or is it an unnamed road?
It's an unnamed road. Okay,
so therefore, I'm looking for guidance about the sense of address relation to those 3 developments at the back. Will they be part of Don's Road, or will they be part of Darabin Boulevard? What's the sense of address for those 3 properties?
The address, that will be dealt with under the subdivisions planning permit, but likely they will be Don Street addresses as well, given that the existing dwelling fronts onto Don Street, and the dwellings behind them will have also the same Don Street address.
Okay.
Councillor McCarthy.
Just whether the presentation then and the engagement with that unmade road, whether in the, I couldn't see anything in the report about whether that is likely to trigger a requirement for the road to be made with increased usage, and who then becomes responsible for that? Does that become council's responsibility, or is that the adjoining property owners? Should there be a desire to have that road made?
Big road.
Big condition, I think, Mr. Becker, is that right?
For what the condition is, yes, we should.
So I'm just looking through the conditions.
Sure.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. We note on page 231 of the agenda, we did refer this application to assets and properties, and no objection to the use of the right of way. It is named, but it's an unnamed road.
Oh, unnamed road. Sorry, my apologies. I interpreted that as an unmade road, and so concerned about future calls on council to make the road on the public purse when the trigger here is a private development. So that's fine. Thank you.
Any other questions from council? Councillor Greco.
I'm just looking at this from a landscape perspective, and essentially what we have here, there's going to be 3 dwellings are going to be placed on just a little bit more than half of the property that's there. And I'm just wondering whether that leaves sufficient space for appropriate landscaping.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. The application on balance is considered to provide adequate area of landscaping. We note that in the private open space areas of each of the proposed dwellings, there is adequate area that we would consider reasonable for this type of development.
Okay. There's no further questions. We have a recommendation there. Someone move that, or an alternative?
Yeah, I have an alternative recommendation.
Councillor Greco.
Yeah. Again, Mr Mayor, I ask for your indulgence. I'll read it out for the benefit of councillors and the gallery. The alternate motion reads as follows: that the council refuse the application with the grounds as follows. 1. The proposal fails to comply with clause 22.02 neighbourhood character and clause 52.02-1 neighbourhood character of the planning scheme with specific regards to these following points. The first point is that the proposal removes trees from the site and fails to provide sufficient open space for landscaping opportunities, adversely impacting the existing and preferred garden character for the area, particularly to the rear third of the site. The extent of the development, the height, the bulk and the setbacks to boundaries of the proposed buildings are not considered to respect the rear garden character of the neighbourhood, would unreasonably affect the amenity of the neighbouring properties by way of visual bulk, and would not be considered consistent with the existing or preferred neighbourhood character. The second grounds are that the extent of construction is excessive and overbearing to the detriment of the neighbouring dwellings. The third ground is that the front setbacks to the right of way are considered insufficient to provide sufficient landscaping and amenity contrary to the character of the area. The fourth ground is that the secluded private open spaces for the proposed dwellings would be unreasonable, would be unreasonably overshadowed and would provide unacceptable amenity. It is considered that the development fails to accord with the objectives of clause 55 of the Darabin Planning Scheme, standard B29 with regards to solar access to open space and B28 with regards to private open space. The fifth ground is that the extent of landscaping proposed fails to meet the objectives of clause 55 of the Darabin Planning Scheme, standard B13. And the last ground, ground number 6, is that the proposal is an overdevelopment of the site.
Happy to second it, Mr Mayor.
We have a second for the alternative recommendation, which is a refusal. Covered pretty much most of it, Councillor Gregor. Do you want to add to it? Okay. Any other discussion or comments from councillors? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour of the alternative recommendation, please raise your hands. Those against? That's carried. Council has decided to issue a refusal for that item. The councillors have voted on, and all parties have been notified of council decision. The applicant will be given 60 days of appeal rights to go to VCAT if they choose to do so. All objectors will be notified of council decision to refuse that application. Council will now go to VCAT should the applicant proceed to go there to defend council decision to refuse it. Next item for consideration is 5.14, application from 41 to 43 Northern Hay Street Reservoir.
Thank you. This proposal is to construct 6 dwellings over 2 properties. The site is zoned general residential schedule 2. There is no restrictive covenant which affects the land. This application was advertised and 15 objections were received against the application. Objections are outlined on page 240 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 240 to 243 of the agenda. The proposed development generally displays a reasonably high degree of compliance with the requirements of clause 55, with the exception of the street setback, which has been justified in the officer's report. Please see page 244 of the agenda, principally on the basis that the street setbacks in Northern Hay Street are varied and that the setback is consistent with those outlined in the relevant character study for the site. The site provides adequate parking for the residences. The waiver of one visitor space being assessed and supported by Council's Transport Management and Planning Unit. There are appropriate open space areas and upper floor setbacks from adjoining properties to ensure that the surrounding amenity is not unreasonably impacted. The form of the development is traditional and draws from elements in the Northern Hay Street streetscape. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions outlined on pages 234 through 239 of the agenda.
Thank you, Chris. And we have a speaker for this item.
We have Patrick Couching on behalf of the applicant to speak.
Thank you, Patrick. If you can join us at the front here, you've got 5 minutes for your presentation.
Just wanting to let the councillors know that advise that those particular sites within the general residential zone, there's no overlays affecting this particular site. And from my point of view, it meets the criteria for housing enforcement 103 planning scheme, as it is within a change area, and the area we see likely to be subject to change, and this proposal represents complementary change, and we also agree with the officer's recommendation for the proposal in terms of its compliance with the requirements of clause 55 of the Res Code requirements. You can say that the site has a substantial location attributes within close proximity to the tourism translation and the like, and the site represents a good candidate for medium density housing. It's anticipated in the local planning policy framework that smaller households are going to be anticipated, and that this particular proposal does accommodate the range of 2 and 3 bedroom houses. Proposal also includes a traditional design response, and those has been in the area in the D5 precinct, which is characterised by California bungalows. The proposal has sought to take on some of those aspects in terms of the gable ends, the casement windows, the fixed awnings over the windows. So I think in turn the proposal has sought to try and respect that part of the existing neighbourhood character in terms of its detail and its style. It also has sought to minimise impacts in terms of car parking on street, provision of two driveways, and in terms of the front setback, the proposed setbacks for this development are longer than what's actually existing on the site. And one pleasing aspect of this particular proposal is that it doesn't include a front fence. And if you drive down to this particular site, there are prominent front fences along the front, so it will open up this part of the street. Also, in terms of the setbacks, the side setbacks, the quite clear that in excess of the West Code requirements and the single-storey built form allows for the impact on the adjoining to be minimised.
Okay, thank you very much for that. You can resume your seat. Questions from councillors? If not, we have a recommendation. Move Councillor Williams, have a seconder. Councillor Lee. Any councillors wish to speak? If not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Members of the gallery, council decided to issue a notice of decision, technically a permit for that application. All parties have been notified. Objectors will be given 21 days of appeal rights to go to VCAT once they receive council's notification, should they choose to do so. That concludes that item. We now go to 5.15, 9 Johnson Street Reservoir. Over to the officers.
Thank you. This application is for the construction of 4 dwellings. The site is located within the general residential zone Schedule 2. There is no restrictive covenant which affects the land. The application was advertised and 11 objections were received. The objections are summarised on page 259 of the agenda and responded to in detail on pages 260 through 262 of the agenda. The proposed development generally displays a high degree of compliance with the requirements of Clause 55 of the scheme, with the exception being private open spaces for dwellings 2 and 3, which are slightly below the minimum 40 square metre requirement. However, this is required to be rectified by condition 1L, which is contained on page 254 of the agenda. It provides adequate car parking and has appropriate upper floor setbacks from adjoining properties to ensure that surrounding amenity is not unreasonably impacted. The form of the development is traditional and draws from elements in the Johnson Street Estates plan. Therefore, approval is recommended subject to conditions outlined on pages 253 through 257 of the agenda. No speakers are registered for this application.
Thank you very much. Any questions from councillors? If not, we have a recommendation there. Move Councillor Lee. Second Councillor Williams. Any speakers? Any comments?
No,
if not, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Members of the gallery, council decided to issue a notice of decision for that item. All parties have been notified of council decision. Objectors will be given 21 days of appeal right. Should they choose to go to VCAT, the applicant will also be notified of council decision. Next item we're considering is 5.16. 305 to 307 Pony Road Reservoir. Over to the officers.
We have the officers come to present this first.
Okay. This proposal was advertised as a 16-unit development and received 33 objections, but tonight it's subject to a 57A amendment, so it was reduced to 14 dwellings. It's the current proposal under consideration. There's a mix of 2 single-bedroom dwellings, 7 2-bedroom and 5 3-bedroom dwellings. 20 resident car parking spaces are provided. No visitor car parking is provided where the planning scheme suggests 2 spaces. In this case, the reduction is deemed appropriate due to the proximity of trams on Plenty Road, Preston Railway Station, and the various services available in the Preston Activity Centre. The site is located on a general residential zone Schedule 2 of particular relevance, the site is subject to Amendment C137, which proposes the introduction of a residential growth zone, a design and development overlay, and various controls covering building heights, including development of up to 6 stories. The proposal largely complies with that C137 amendment, particularly in relation to the building height, which is at 5 stories, where the amendment suggests a height of up to 6 stories. The proposal is recommended for approval, subject to conditions.
Thank you very much for that. Now we have speakers for this item. We have an applicant and an objector.
We have Neil Crane on behalf of the applicant.
Thank you, Neil. If you can join us at the front here. You've got 5 minutes to speak.
Thank you. The site is a general residential zoning with no variations. It's a 2-lot site with nearly 675 square metres. Tram route 86 runs directly outside the site. It's immediate walking distance of Preston Central Activity Centre, 400 metres north of Bell Street, which is the main arterial road. And Preston train station is approximately 800 metres to the west. The site has 2 residential abutters and 1 laneway to the rear. It's clearly an area where council are supporting more intensive development, and that's clearly already happening in an established 4-storey apartment building at 293 County Road. The proposal is different from the existing 1 volume and 2 volume per lot, which you might find on the street, but that change is envisaged. The outcome responds to the rural character and density for this area as proposed and adopted by council. The site is designated as a high change area within council's planning scheme. It's one of the areas the council has designated for higher density development. The council adopted Amendment C137 recommends the site for up to 6 stories. We're proposing 5 in this instance. The proposal incorporates access via the rear laneway, ensuring traffic impacts on County Road are minimised with full resident car parking provided. The proposal adds further housing diversity, as encouraged by council's policy, with 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments proposed, meeting future housing demands as identified in council's adopted housing strategy. It's a genuine mix, including 5 larger 3-bedroom units and a mix of 1 and 2 bedrooms included also. The site is extremely well served for public transport options, as outlined in the tram route just outside the site, and the train station within walking distance. Building height is supported by council, and it's below that max height envisaged by council's endorsed amendment. As concluded by council's officer's assessment, the proposal complies with the guidance included in Amendment C137 and existing local policy across 2206 for higher density developments. Site coverage is 67%, which is well below the 80% envisaged by the council adopted policy. Plenty Road is designated as a strategic corridor. This is where council has identified significant growth and change to occur. Issues that were of concern have been resolved by council to achieve a suitable and acceptable outcome which meets the current proposed policy with a recent reduction from 16 blocks to 14. Council's local policy specifically discourages the underdevelopment of sites such as this one due to its strategic location and designation. Council's plan correctly concluded that the objective concerns which were included of merit are addressed by design in response, council's policy and appropriate conditions. The design response to County Road includes landscaping in the front setback, no crossovers, with Unit 1 and 2 reflecting a townhouse style over 2 floors, which are 3-bedroom with garden areas to the front and side. The built form to the rear is stepped back from the rear laneway and adjoining dwellings, each increasing the outward wall. providing a setback of 14 metres to dwelling to the rear from the top level. Council's plan undertook a thorough assessment of the proposal against Council's adopted current and future policy. The proposal meets these policies and in planning terms is a well-balanced and suitable design response, which includes a good mix of 1, 2 and 3 bedroom apartments.
Thank you very much. If you can resume your seat. We now have an objector too who's asked us.
John Esky.
Thank you, John. If you can join us at the front here. You've also got 5 minutes.
To the Honourable Mayor and Darwin Councillors, my young family and I live at 309 Cleaning Road in Preston, and I speak on behalf of those objectors and neighbours in close proximity to the property. Collectively, we own and occupy both neighbouring properties, and which include our young families and the elderly situated behind this site. Collectively, we are deeply concerned with the following aspects of this proposed development, which proposes to replace 2 family homes with a 5-storey development. The site slope, particularly at the rear, is extremely aggressive, resulting in overlooking into the neighbouring and rear properties, and also presenting an extremely stark and dominant street appearance, especially when combined with the non-compliant setbacks. The site slope appears to be closer to 50 to 55 degree slope versus the 45 degree recommendation for 2 independent evaluations, which is largely driven by the proposal's excessive height. Additionally, C137 documentation advises that rear upper floor setbacks must comply with a 30 degree angle starting at the adjoining site boundary that is to the rear of the development site, which this proposal also does not comply with. Regarding street frontage, 3137 advises that to get greater than the minimum 4 stories, residential zone developments must have a minimum frontage of 20 metres, which this site does also not comply with. The proposed street setbacks are also non-compliant, with the ground level at 4 metres not meeting current Res Code standard in consideration of both neighbouring properties. More importantly, the first and second floor setbacks are also not C137 compliant, as they are frozen at a reduced 2.45 metres from the street for floors 1 and 2. Rear setbacks are also not compliant with C137, with at least 5.5 metres required on the first level, versus the proposal's 1 metre on the ground level from the rear and less than 2 metres from the first floor. This decreases visibility, poses safety risks and encourages overlooking from the higher units. Excessive height. This proposal is 3 stories higher than both the neighbouring family homes and is 8 metres above the current Res Code standard. It's virtually doubling both neighbouring properties as it stands today. Additionally, reducing this proposal to 4 stories will only reduce the dwelling count by 1, and given the setbacks already noted, significant changes are required to levels 1 and 2 to comply with C137. A more appropriate consideration could be a smaller 4-storey development with a smaller 4th story. Lack of parking. When applying the current parking scheme, this proposal is missing at least 2 car spaces to comply. The 2.4 metre car park widths need to be widened to 2.6 to comply, and as you've already noted, this proposal includes the controversial mechanical parking in the basement and does not accommodate visitor parking. Laneway traffic and safety risks. With only 1 entrance to this laneway, the proposed development would increase traffic for local residents by at least 4 times, given the number of proposed dwellings and car parks, adversely impacting the safety of us nearby residents. With at least 33 objections received by Council, we treat this as a significantly high volume, and from what I've seen, one of the highest volume counts tonight, suggesting common alignment on many of the issues I'm raising with you this evening. Importantly, C137 has not yet been approved as legislation. In its absence, my legal advice suggests the current Res Code laws should apply when applications are being contested, but collectively we are open to the professional view from the Council on this matter. When the Council submitted 137 to the Minister for Planning late last year, we were advised the Minister then had 40 days to make a decision on the amendment. Given it has sat there for over 6 months, not yet approved, it appears less likely this will be approved as formal legislation as each month passes by. In 2013, a 4-storey development for this site was rejected by this planning committee for several reasons very similar to those I've already covered. In turn, the landlord submitted updated plans for the site which took into account the council's feedback at the time. The amended 3-storey proposed development was approved. We are seeking consistency now, given the same landlord is seeking a much larger, less compliant 5-storey development.
20 seconds.
Under similar legislation on the same site with the same council. Collectively, we're not against change and appropriate development. We actively encourage appropriate development, very similar to the townhouses seen at 226 Gower Street up the road and the 3-storey development at 584 Plenty Road. Can I please thank you for your time?
Thank you very much.
You reject this for an amendment.
Thank you. If you can take your seat back in the gallery. We now have questions from councillors. Any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just get a sense of the 3 and 4-storey developments around the immediate neighbouring areas along the corridor. I note there are some that are triple-storey. So whereabouts are they situated, and do they, particularly the one along Swallow Street, do they also use that rear laneway for access their car parking?
Which particular?
Where are the 3 and 4-storey developments along Plenty Road, number 1, and also number 12, 14 and 10 Swallow Street, do they also use any of the laneway for access their vehicles?
There's a lane there, but I can't confirm whether that's utilised purely for the access.
From the aerial, it appears that the Swallow Street, they definitely have vehicular access from Swallow Street, and garages appear to be in the centre of the site. So I'd say it's likely that the Swallow Street development actually takes access from there. In terms of there's at 299 Plenty Road, which is the corner of Plenty Road and Swift Street, I believe that is a 3-storey development.
Yes, I think it is.
Across the road on Swift Street at 297 Plenty Road, I believe that is a 4-storey development.
So which one?
So the one that's on the other side, so 297
Right.
Plenty Road.
Yep.
I believe that is a 4-storey development, and there have been other permits not acted on that have been, I think, principally 3-storey. I think there's been at least one 4-storey approved through this, but prior to the introduction, or the sort of early permits and the emergency
So just to the direct rear of the site, there's a set of walk-up flats, probably dating 1970s. They have all of their car parking
on site. Yep.
A large expanse of concrete at the rear.
Yep.
Councillor McCarthy.
If I could just get some guidance through you to the officers, Mr. Mayor, the angle, the degrees of the setback to the properties to the rear, there was a comment by the objector that suggested it was significantly higher than the 45 degrees stipulated in C137. I'm just looking at it at the moment. I can't quite make out what it would be.
If you were to say cut a line, because it's measured as at the furthest edge of the lane, so the lane or the rear of the property's front and Swallow Street.
Yes.
Just to confirm all the setbacks, it's measured obviously from that edge, and it's to be 3 metres at ground level. So the resident mentioned a 1 metre setback, but the actual standard under 737 is the number of metres from the back of the Swallow Street properties. So the lane is already 3 metres, and that's 5.5 at first floor level. So when you account for the fact the lane is providing the 3 metres, and then the site for the development, the first floor level is 3 metres. So that's about 6. So it's over 5.5. Then as you get up to the next 3 levels, you're going via the 30-degree scenario that the applicant has defined a scenario which is closer to 45. And if you're looking at an elevation from, say, the south, you'd probably find, if you're looking at that southern elevation, anything like balustrade or the top of those levels I guess, triangular sections of the building which would be sitting outside of the 45 at levels 2, 3, and well, the top 3 levels.
Top 3, yep.
As to the exact I'm not exactly sure. This much of this elevation is sort of covered beyond the 45.
Any other questions?
Well, just I suppose just supplementary to that, on that basis, if I can just get confirmation that it's not compliant with the 45-degree setback.
But I suppose the driving part of that is the context being with the rear lane plus the rear property has got a large apron of concrete that's not interfacing with it, so to interface directly to the west. So that's part of the applicant's exercise.
Yeah, no, that's fine. They're qualifiers, but just in terms of the crude kind of calculation, it's not compliant on that basis. Thank you.
Councillor Lee.
I've got a proposed alternate motion to the recommendation.
If there's no further questions, Councillor Lee, your motion?
Yes, thank you. The proposed alternate motion is for refusal, in that number one, the proposed development is not consistent with the proposed design development overlay, DDO, forming part of the Amendment C137 of the Darebin Planning Scheme, currently being seriously entertained, due to the street frontage not meeting the minimum requirement of 20 metres. Number two, the proposed development will unreasonably impact on the visual amenity of the surrounding residential properties, particularly to the side and rear of the site. And number three, the development does not provide an adequate level of landscaping. And number four, the proposed development is an overdevelopment of the site.
Happy to second that, Mr Mayor.
Second, Councillor Villala. Anything further to add, Councillor Lee?
Yes, I'll just speak to it very briefly. I think this is the legacy of our C137, where Council originally had different vision for this area for 4 stories, but somehow it ended up being 6 stories. One of the things that struck me about this development is that it has a street frontage of less than 19 metres, which does not meet a minimum requirement of 20 metres required on DDO3 of C137. And I think that is a very significant breach, because the minimum requirements are just that is a requirement. And if you don't meet it, then you shouldn't go past go. So I think this significantly fails that by a wide margin. The impact on the rear of the property, as already mentioned by Councillor McCarthy and the applicant, has already been illustrated. It does have a significant overbearing to the rear of the boundary, to the southern end, and that's seen in the elevation of it. I understand that the 35 versus 30-degree one is still up for debate. However, I think we heard from residents throughout this development along the corridor what their wishes are. I do also want to draw Councillor's attention to page 287 of the report, where it says the new developments along Plenty Road should be supporting activating particular sites of Tyler Street, Summerhill and Lancaster Gates. This site is not near any of those areas, so it does nothing to contribute to the activation of those 3 major activity centres. So again, I'm not opposed to development. I think what the original application for 3-storey and 9 dwellings approved back in 2013 is a good one, and I think most residents be supportive of that. But having a 5-storey development that does not have the minimum requirement of 20 metre street frontage, and also outside of those 3 major areas that we seek to activate, is a bridge too far. So on those grounds, I'm unable to support it.
Thank you, Councillor. Second, wish to add?
Oh, just that it's a pity it's not 3-storey. The first application. 5 stories excessive. It doesn't look appropriate. It's an overdevelopment for the site. Thank you, Mr Mayor.
If there's no further speakers, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried. Members of the Gallery, Council decided to issue a refusal for that application. Council will notify all interested parties. All objectors will be told of Council decision. The applicant will give them 60 days of appeal rights to go to VCAT should he choose or she choose to do so. Council will then represent itself to defend the refusal if it goes to VCAT. Thank you for that. And we now go on to the next item, which is 5.17, 63 to 71 Plenty Road, Preston.
Thank you. I know that each item has to be considered in turn, but the next 2 items relate to the same property. So,
Yes.
as to your preference, would you like me to discuss them in tandem and then you can vote on them individually, or would you like to take the proper process and
I think individually, seeing one's for 14, one's for 18, that the content might be similar or...
Let's do them slowly.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first application, item 5.17, is an application to amend an existing planning permit. Planning permit D374/2004, which was for an 11-storey building containing 83 dwellings and 4 shops. And this amendment proposes to change that to a 14-storey building containing 85 dwellings and 2 shops. This site is zoned in the commercial 1 zone, and there is no restrictive covenant which affects the site. Principally, the revised proposal does not comply with Amendment C37, as a 14-storey building is proposed where the design and development overlay is seeking a maximum of 12 storeys. In addition, the internal layout of the dwellings is such that they will result in poor internal amenity for future occupants, particularly with regard to lack of outlook, lack of direct light and reliance on borrowed light. Therefore, refusal is recommended as outlined on pages 294 to 295 of the agenda. Now, my understanding is that the owner registered to speak and then subsequently said that they were not going to attend.
So there's no speakers for this item? No. Okay. Councillor McCarthy.
I'm happy to move the recommendation, but before I do have a question, which is a process one. Were C137 to be signed off and written into law by the Minister, would council have to, would the planning committee have to consider this right now? Would this application have been able to be submitted, given how significantly in breach it is of C137?
Someone can apply for any kind of planning permit that they want to. What they apply for does not have to comply with the scheme. We are tasked, or the council is tasked with ensuring that what is approved complies with the scheme.
So that's a very good answer, thank you. So the fact that it was not, the notice was not given because it was clearly non-compliant, but under the current rules, and even under C137, were it to be adopted and written into the Darebin planning scheme, we'd still have to go through this process. An officer's time would be taken up with what is essentially a spurious application. I'll move the recommendation, but I appreciate the officer's comments about the fact that we still need to consider it.
I'm happy to second.
Happy to second.
I think it's pretty obvious, but I would just, in terms of the reasons for refusal, I would just want to draw councillors' attention to pages 295 and 296, which I think sets out the what's taken place up until now, and the fact that there has been previous variations on this for this site, including an 8-storey and an 11-storey. So this, to me, appears to be one of fairly speculative, given the position that council has clearly taken and what has been discussed at other levels. And I think it's unfortunately a great waste of our officers' time, unfortunately for them and unfortunately for us, that we're even having to consider this. So, given how off the market is.
Any other speakers?
Look, I'll just add to that that the council's is pretty clear on what its envelope is to be for that particular area. This is way out of the ballpark, and it's rightly that it is refused.
Okay. If there's no further comments or speakers, I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That item is refused. As per the recommendation, all parties be notified of council decision. The applicant will have an appeal right to go to VCAT should they choose to do so. Next item we're considering is 5.18, which is 6371 Plenty Road again. Over to the officers.
So this application is for the construction of an 18-storey building comprising 135 dwellings and 2 shops. The site is owned commercial 1 and there is no restricted covenant which affects the site. This has, in principle, the same issues as the previous application. It's 18 storeys where we're seeking a maximum of 12 and the internal layout is 4. Now, just a procedural point. Prior to the application being reported to Council's Planning Committee, the applicant has appealed to the Tribunal of Council's failure failure to decide the application. And therefore, should council decide not to support it, it should determine to not to support the application and advise the tribunal and the parties as such, rather than the current recommendation which says that the proposal will be refused and a notice of refusal will be issued. So the grounds are exactly the same. It's just in the minutes it needs to say that that council is taking a position rather than issuing a notice of refusal.
McCarthy.
I'm happy to move in the direction as has been described. Before I do though, if I'm clear from the explanation we've just been given, the trigger to VCAT means that this is now potentially in VCAT's hands to decide.
We're forming a view.
Definitely in VCAT's. It is definitely in VCAT's hands. And so I would ask also that in relation to the statement of grounds, objection that's been received against this application.
It's a statement of ground, yeah. So it's been described as an objection, but it's a statement of ground. So an affected resident has applied to VCAT to be a party to this appeal.
So given that, what is the trigger for notification of other concerned or affected residents in relation to this, given that it will go to VCAT and it hasn't been advertised?
So it was not advertised through council because the applicant appealed for failure to decide. VCAT has already directed notification to occur.
So, and how far does that notification occur under VCAT?
The notification was not, it was to the directly adjoining properties, and I think within 60 odd metres of the site. It was not as extensive as council had originally suggested, but the tribunal was able to make its own decision. It was not bound by what we felt was the preferred method of notice and extent of notice. But affected properties within 60 metres of the site, is my understanding.
And is it just a supplementary to that? Is it within council's powers or capacity to notify as per our own practices, if we consider that it's appropriate to notify further?
It's not really part of the VCAT process. We're bound by VCATs.
So I'll ask the other way. Are we prevented from providing further notification to meet the
I think VCAT already made a decision as to who notifies and how far, and we were the responsible authority which were made to send notifications out. Is that correct?
I think under the VCAT regulations, they make the applicant actually physically do it, and we just provide details. But because VCAT has actually ruled on this matter, so we had the opportunity to present what we believed our case was in terms of notification, and VCAT has actually ruled on this matter. I will tread very carefully in going around that, because that may bring us into contempt.
I appreciate
we don't
answer.
want costs of water against us either.
I just think there's a community expectation around breadth of notification, but if there's been a VCAT ruling, then we need to work within those confines.
You'll move the recommendation.
And I'll move the recommendation as the revised recommendation, which is about forming a view. I'm not sure. I think
forming a view. Thank you.
That is.
And seconded, Councillor Williams. I think we've had enough discussion on this. We've got another item to discuss. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Council will now go to VCAT and defendant's decision forming a view of not supporting the application. Okay, thank you. That concludes our planning matter items listed in section 5. We now go to other business, 6.1, general plan information. Move Councillor. Any questions first? No. Move Councillor Lee. Seconded.
I'm happy to second.
Seconded. Councillor Greco. I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Now, I understand we have urgent business to be considered here this evening from the officers.
There is one urgent.
So we need someone to move the acceptance of that. Councillor Williams has moved. Seconded, Councillor Lee. I'll put that to a vote to accept an urgent item for consideration and a confidential matter too at that. So I'll put that to a vote. All those in favour? That's carried. Okay.
Have you moved to go into camera there?
Move Councillor. What's your name? Walsh. Seconded, Councillor Williams to go into camera. All those in favour?
Yeah.
Carried. Members of the gallery have to discuss an item in camera, which is a confidential matter, so I need you to vacate the chambers until we discuss and finalise this matter.